Hi, and welcome to an in-depth tactical review of yesterday's Champions League quarter-final of Tottenham versus Manchester City. It was a highly tactical battle between Pochettino and Guardiola, but before we get into all the good stuff, I'd appreciate it if you liked and subscribed and shared the video as we try to grow the channel. Anyway, let's get into it. The Champions League quarter-final was the first at Tottenham's new stadium. Man City, the away team, were the favourites for the match with their squad depth, but Pochettino's side were not to be underestimated. In the end, the match ended 1-0 to Tottenham, with Heung-min Son providing the crucial goal, which, given the way the match panned out tactically, was predictable. The first surprise of the night came in the starting lineup. Guardiola's Mr. Reliable, Bernardo Silva, was absent due to a muscle injury sustained during warm-up, an indication of the heavy workload placed on Pep's men. Gundogan also came into the 11 as Pep continues to ease Kevin De Bruyne back into the lineup. Mendy was also absent, also due to being eased back to fitness, which allowed Delph to be surprisingly reintroduced into the squad instead of playing Laporte out wide. Spurs opted for a back four instead of a three, with Sanchez starting on the bench. The midfield turned out in a solid 4-2-3-1, with Son and Dele alternating flanks. Harry Kane led the lineup until the moment of his injury. Now, let's take a look at the in-game tactics, focusing on the four main areas of tactical periodization, which are defensive organization, defensive transition, offensive transition, and offensive organization. Let's start with defensive organization. Defensively, Manchester City pressed high when they could. The back four consisted of Delph, a left back surprisingly, and a double midfield pivot of Gundogan and Fernandinho forming a shield. The wingers dropped into the second row when defending. However, David Silva played high up alongside the pitch with Sergio Aguero, meaning that City pressed high in a 4-4-2. Their main objective was to prevent Spurs from playing out into midfield and forming controlled passes into their attacking midfield trio, who would then release the attackers. However, this was countered by Tottenham's attacking organisation. As previously discussed, they had three floating attackers behind Harry Kane. When pressed high, Spurs were willing to play long into Harry Kane, who did a good job of holding up play all match. This, as a result, allowed the ball to be played into their three floaters. When in stable possession, they had a clear tactic: exploit City's defensive weakness at left back in Fabian Delph. The main way this was achieved was by pushing up Sissoko and Winks into the left-hand channel to combine with Rose, and sometimes even Kane. This, as a result, drew City's team across the pitch, and Fabian Delph's positioning errors were exposed in this phase. He would tuck in too far infield, allowing the ball to be switched quickly to a man on the right, for example Trippier, who would get the ball into the box. To exemplify this, Trippier attempted the most crosses for his team with 6, and here's his touch map. Pay close attention to the areas where he got his crosses in from, the inside right channel. When City attempted to counter-attack, they lacked their usual cutting edge. The high press from Tottenham prevented their midfielders from getting on the half turn and playing penetrating passes. Instead, they were usually forced into passing back to Edison or passes wide to the less creative fullbacks. When they did get past the midfield, as they played inverted wingers, their first instinct was to cut in towards the traffic. This, as a result, slowed down the speed of their counter-attacks, allowing Spurs to recover and defend. When Spurs countered, on the other hand, they had a clear game plan, which was again to attack Delph. However, this happened in a different way. In this scenario, Harry Kane would drop deep and collect the ball. Fabian Delph would have tucked in during the City build-up and was caught in two minds whether to cover the space left behind by Otamendi or Laporte, or to stay out wide marking his man. In this time, Son would have pulled out and run into the channel and put Delph onto the back foot. This pattern repeated itself throughout the match, and this is how Spurs scored their goal. The Man City midfield was drawn to the ball and Delph tucked in too far, leaving Son in space. The ball was switched wide to him, eventually leading to their goal. Son's heat map shows him being active on the inside right channel against Delph. Man City didn't have success with their counter-attacks, however they were more successful with their stable attacks. As always, the centre-backs split wide with the full-backs pushing higher up, and sometimes moving centrally. However, this is where their midfield adapted in this match. One of their holding midfielders, Fernandinho, would drop deep, attracting attention from Spurs midfielders. Gundogan, who was the main deep playmaker in the match, would leave his defensive shield position and drift into space on the left-hand side, as shown by his touch and heat maps. Silva would either stay high up the pitch or drift to the right, providing options for players out wide in the spaces vacated by Tottenham. This allowed them to dominate possession with 58%. They would then depend on these free midfielders, play it wide to the wingers who were depended on for a moment of magic, as Aguero, penalty aside, was kept out of the game. Overall, Pochettino's narrow midfield defending was enough to mastermind a 1-0 victory to take to the Etihad in a week. The tie is finally posed, so join us next week for a review of the second leg. So subscribe to make sure you see that, as well as sharing this video wherever you can. Thank you.